What happens when Hollywood's most beloved star walks into what should be a simple morning talk show interview, only to face an ambush that nobody saw coming? In just 44 seconds, one comment from the host would ignite a firestorm that turned a friendly chat into an absolute disaster, exposing the true colors of someone who thought they were untouchable. The studio lights were bright that morning. The audience was buzzing with excitement. Dwayne Johnson, known to millions as The Rock, walked onto the set with his trademark smile. He waved to the crowd. They went wild. This was supposed to be easy. A quick conversation about his new movie. Some laughs. Maybe a funny story or two. But from the moment he sat down, something felt different. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the center of the table. Her co-hosts flanked her on both sides. Joy Behar sat to her left, arms crossed. Sunny Hostin was next to Joy, looking through some notes. Sarah Haynes sat on the right side, smiling nervously. Ana Navarro was at the end, her expression unreadable. The energy at the table was tense. Dwayne could feel it. But he's a professional. He's done thousands of interviews. He knows how to handle anything. Or so he thought. "So, Dwayne," Whoopi started, not even looking up from her cards. "Welcome to The View." "Thank you for having me," Dwayne said warmly. "It's great to be here with all of you ladies." The audience clapped. Dwayne smiled wider, and he was trying to bring good energy to the table, but Whoopi wasn't matching it. "Your new movie is out," Whoopi continued, her tone flat. "Another action film, another exploding building, another paycheck, I guess." The audience went quiet. That wasn't a question. That was a jab. Dwayne's smile stayed on his face, but his eyes changed. He'd been in this business long enough to recognize disrespect when he heard it. "Well," Dwayne said carefully, I think audiences enjoy these films because they're fun. They're an escape. People work hard all week, and sometimes they just want to sit back and watch something entertaining." "Entertaining," Whoopi repeated, like the word tasted bad in her mouth. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Joy jumped in, sensing the tension. "What Whoopi means is, do you ever think about doing more serious work? Something with, substance?" Dwayne turned to Joy. His posture still relaxed, but his jaw tightening slightly. "I've done dramatic work. I've done comedies. I've done family films. I choose projects that I believe in. Projects that my daughters can watch and be proud of their dad." "Your daughters," Whoopi said, leaning back in her chair. "Right. Because nothing says good parenting like teaching your kids that money is more important than art." The audience gasped. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Even Anna looked shocked. That crossed a line. Dwayne's kids were off limits, and everyone knew it. But Whoopi had just gone there, on live television, in front of millions of people. Dwayne's smile disappeared completely. His entire demeanor changed. The warmth that he'd walked in with was gone, replaced by something colder, something harder. "Excuse me?" His voice was quiet but firm. "Oh, did I strike a nerve?" Whoopi asked, a slight smirk on her face. She seemed almost pleased with herself, like she'd accomplished something. Like making a guest uncomfortable was the goal all along. Joy tried again. "Whoopi, come on, let's just—" "No, Joy," Whoopi interrupted without even looking at her. "I think this is important. I think we need to talk about this. About how Hollywood has become this machine that just churns out garbage and calls it entertainment. And people like Dwayne here are happy to feed that machine as long as the checks keep coming." "People like me," Dwayne repeated slowly. Each word was measured, careful. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "You heard me," Whoopi said, finally looking directly at him. "You're one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. You make these mindless movies that require zero talent, just muscles and a smile, and you're teaching your daughters that that's success." Dwayne took a breath. A deep one. The kind you take when you're trying to keep your composure. When you're trying not to say something you'll regret. The cameras were tight on his face. Every emotion flickering across it was being broadcast to millions. "Let me make sure I understand," Dwayne said, his voice still controlled, but with an edge now. "You think you know how I'm raising my daughters? You think you know what I teach them?" "I know what they see," Whoopi shot back. "They see their father making silly action movies. They see him doing shampoo commercials. They see him caring more about his brand than his craft." "My craft," Dwayne said, leaning forward slightly. "Do you know how many hours I train for these roles? Do you know how many stunts I do myself? Do you know how many times I've been injured on set and kept going because I didn't want to let the crew down? Do you know anything about the actual work that goes into what I do?" "I know it's not real acting," Whoopi said dismissively. She waved her hand like she was swatting away a fly, like his words meant nothing. "Running and jumping and looking tough? That's not acting. That's just physical labor with a camera pointed at you." The studio was dead silent. The cameras kept rolling. The producers in the control room were probably losing their minds. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't how interviews were supposed to go, but Whoopi wasn't stopping. She was digging in deeper. "I think," Dwayne said slowly, his voice low and controlled, "that you're out of line." "Am I?" Whoopi shot back. "Or am I just saying what everyone else is thinking? You're not a real actor, Dwayne. You're a brand. You're a walking, talking action figure. And frankly, it's insulting to those of us who actually take our craft seriously." Sonny tried to intervene. "Whoopi, maybe we should move on to—" "No," Whoopi cut her off sharply. "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of sitting here and acting like these people deserve the same respect as real artists. He's a wrestler who got lucky. That's it. He has no training, no real experience. He just showed up with big muscles and a nice smile, and Hollywood threw money at him." "A wrestler who got lucky," Dwayne repeated. His jaw was clenched now. His hands were gripping the armrests of his chair. "That's what you think this is? Luck? What else would you call it?" Whoopi challenged. "You didn't go to acting school. You didn't do theater. You didn't pay your dues the way real actors do. You just walked in because you were famous for throwing people around in a ring." Sarah was gripping her notes so tightly the paper was crumpling. Joy had her eyes closed, like she couldn't bear to watch. Anna was staring at Whoopi with something close to horror. But Whoopi kept going. "My daughters," Dwayne said, his voice dropping even lower. "Watch me work. They watch me treat every single person on set with respect. The grips, the cameramen, the extras, everyone. They watch me show up early and stay late. They watch me sign autographs for every fan who asks. They watch me use my platform to try to make people's lives better, to make them smile, to give them hope. That's what I'm teaching them. That's what they see." "How nice," Whoopi said sarcastically. "So humble. He's so perfect. Tell me, do you practice that speech in the mirror?" That was it. That was the moment. Everyone in the studio could feel it. The shift. The breaking point. Dwayne's face changed. Not with anger exactly. With something deeper. Disappointment, maybe. Or sadness. The look of someone who'd tried to be reasonable and realized there was no point. Dwayne stood up. Not quickly. Not aggressively. But with purpose. Deliberate. Controlled. The entire audience watched as he reached for his microphone pack. His hands were steady. His movements were calm. But everything about his body language said this was over. "I've been disrespected before," Dwayne said, his voice carrying across the studio, without him even raising it. Every word was clear. Every syllable landed with weight. "I grew up with nothing. My family was evicted from our apartment when I was 14 years old, as I watched my mother cry because she didn't know how we'd eat. I played football in college with a torn shoulder because my family needed me to keep that scholarship. We couldn't afford to lose it. I had dreams of playing in the NFL, and I watched those dreams die when I got cut. I slept in my car when I had $7 in my pocket. $7. That's all I had in the world. He paused. The studio was so quiet, you could hear people breathing. I worked my way up from nothing, he continued, and I did it with respect. Respect for the business. Respect for the people I worked with. Respect for the audience who chose to support me. And respect for myself. I never forgot where I came from. I never forgot what it felt like to have nothing. And I made a promise to myself that if I ever made it, if I ever got the chance to be successful, I would never let success change who I was. I would never become the kind of person who looks down on others, who judges others, who tears others down to build myself up. He unclipped his microphone and placed it carefully on the table. The small thud it made seemed louder than it should have been. I came here today as a guest, Dwayne said, making eye contact with each of the women at the table. I came here to talk about a movie that hundreds of people worked on, people who have families to feed. Stunt coordinators who spent months choreographing every fight. Stunt performers who risk their lives to make those scenes look real. Cinematographers who wake up at 4 a.m. to get the perfect shot. Editors who spend months in dark rooms making sure every frame is perfect. Visual effects artists who work overtime to create worlds that don't exist. Costume designers. Makeup artists. Set builders. Every single one of them poured their heart into this project. And you sit there, in your comfortable chair, with your guaranteed paycheck, and you insult all of them. You insult their work. You insult me. And worst of all, you bring my children into it. You question my parenting. You act like you know anything about my family or my values. Whoopi opened her mouth to respond, but Dwayne held up his hand. Not aggressively, just a simple gesture that said, "Stop. Wait. I'm not done yet." "I don't need to hear it," he said firmly. "I've heard enough. You want to talk about real artists? Let me tell you about real artists. Real artists lift each other up. Real artists understand that there's room for everyone. There's room for serious dramas that make you think. There's room for fun action movies that make you smile. There's room for independent films that push boundaries. There's room for blockbusters that bring families together. There's room for comedies and tragedies and everything in between. Real artists don't tear other people down to make themselves feel important. Real artists don't use their platform as a weapon. Real artists don't hide behind the excuse of asking tough questions when really they're just being cruel." He took a breath. The audience was frozen. Some people had tears in their eyes, not because it was sad, necessarily, but because they were witnessing something real. Something raw. Something that didn't happen often on television. "You talk about me not being a real actor," Dwayne continued. "You talk about me not having training or experience. But let me ask you something. Have you ever had to learn an entire language for a role? Because I have. Have you ever had to train for 6 months straight, 7 days a week, to transform your body into a completely different shape? Because I have. Have you ever had to do take after take of a stunt that could seriously hurt you if one thing goes wrong? Because I have. Have you ever had to carry an entire movie on your shoulders, knowing that if it fails, hundreds of people might not work again? Because I have." Joy was openly crying now. Sarah was nodding slightly. Sunny had her hand over her mouth. Anna was watching Whoopi, waiting to see how she'd respond to this. But Whoopi just sat there. Her arms were crossed. Her face was set in stone. She didn't look sorry. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed, like Dwayne was the problem, like he was overreacting. Joy was staring at her hands. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. Sunny was shaking her head slowly. Anna's eyes were wide. And Whoopi? Whoopi just sat there, her arms crossed, her face hard. "You know what the sad part is?" Dwayne asked, his voice softer now, but no less powerful. "I actually used to respect you. Not just respect you. I admired you. I grew up watching you. My mother loved you. We'd sit together and watch your movies, watch your stand-up, watch you on this very show. I thought you were brilliant, funny, talented, fearless, real. I thought you were someone who used their voice to make things better, to lift people up, to shine a light on important issues. I thought you understood what it meant to struggle, to overcome, to rise above. He shook his head slowly. The disappointment on his face was clear. But this, he continued, this isn't any of that. This isn't brave. This isn't fearless. This is just mean. This is just someone who's been in the spotlight so long that they forgot what it's like to treat people with basic human decency. You forgot what it's like to be kind. You forgot that words have power, that you can hurt people with them, that just because you can say something doesn't mean you should. The audience was completely silent, waiting, watching. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real life happening in real time. "Are you done?" Whoopi asked coldly. "Yeah," Dwayne said. "I'm done. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with this table. And I'm done pretending that this kind of behavior is acceptable just because you're famous." He turned to the audience. They were completely silent. Some had their hands over their mouths. Others were filming on their phones. This was going to be everywhere within minutes. "I apologize to all of you," Dwayne said to the crowd. "You came here expecting a fun show. You deserved better than this. Well, I hope you understand why I can't stay." The audience started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder. Then they were standing. The entire studio audience was on their feet, applauding Dwayne as he walked toward the exit. It was extraordinary. They were cheering for a guest walking out. They were showing exactly whose side they were on. Whoopi's face went red. "Sit down," she said to the audience. Her voice was sharp, angry. "Sit down right now." But they didn't sit. They kept clapping. They kept standing. Some were even cheering. Whoopi looked at her co-hosts for support, but none of them were looking at her. Joy was staring at the table. Sarah was wiping her eyes. Sunny was watching Dwayne walk away with something like admiration on her face. Anna was the only one who met Whoopi's eyes, and she just shook her head slowly. "Fine," Whoopi snapped. "Leave. See if I care. You're just another celebrity with a fragile ego who can't handle real questions." Dwayne stopped at the edge of the stage. He didn't turn around. He just spoke over his shoulder, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Those weren't real questions," he said. "Those were attacks. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that, that tells me everything I need to know." Then he was gone. He walked through the backstage area, past the stunned crew members, past the producers who were trying to figure out what to do next, past everyone. He got into his car and he left. Just like that. He walked away from one of the biggest talk shows on television because he refused to be disrespected. Back in the studio, chaos had erupted. The producers were yelling into their headsets. The director was trying to figure out how to fill the rest of the segment. And at the table, the co-hosts were sitting in uncomfortable silence. "Well," Whoopi finally said, see her voice dripping with sarcasm, "I guess we know who can't handle the heat." Joy turned to her slowly. "Whoopi, that was too far." "What?" Whoopi looked genuinely surprised. "You brought up his kids," Sunny said quietly. "You questioned his parenting on live television. What did you think was going to happen?" "I was making a point," Whoopi insisted. "You were being cruel," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "There's a difference between asking tough questions and just being mean. That was mean." Anna finally spoke up. "I've interviewed presidents. I've gone head-to-head with senators. I've asked hard questions to powerful people. But I've never, ever made it personal like that. You attacked him as a person. You attacked his family. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just ugly." Whoopi looked around the table. All four of her co-hosts were staring at her with varying degrees of disappointment and frustration. The audience was still murmuring. The energy in the room had completely shifted. "Are you all seriously taking his side?" Whoopi asked. "There shouldn't be sides," Joy said. "He was a guest. Our guest. And you ambushed him." "I asked questions," Whoopi protested. "No," Sunny corrected. "You insulted him. Repeatedly. You insulted his career. You insulted his choices. You insulted his parenting. You kept pushing and pushing until he had no choice but to leave." "He always had a choice," Whoopi argued. "He chose to walk out like a child throwing a tantrum." "He chose to have self-respect," Anna said firmly, "something you apparently lost sight of today." The producers were making frantic hand signals. They needed to go to commercial. They needed to stop this before it got worse. But it was already too late. The damage was done, not just to the show, but to Whoopi's reputation. "We need to take a break," Sarah said, looking at the camera. Her voice was professional, but her hands were shaking. "We'll be right back." The moment they cut to commercial, Whoopi stood up. "I don't need to sit here and be lectured by all of you." "Then don't," Joy said tiredly. "But you need to understand what you just did. That man has never been in a scandal. He's known for being kind to everyone. Fans, crew members, other actors. But everyone has a story about how nice Dwayne Johnson is. And you just pushed him so far that he walked out on live television. Do you understand how bad you had to be for that to happen?" Whoopi didn't answer. She just grabbed her things and walked off the set. Her co-hosts watched her go, and not one of them tried to stop her. In the control room, the producers were in full panic mode. Their biggest star had just created a disaster. Their guest had walked out. The co-hosts were barely speaking to each other, and millions of people had just watched the whole thing unfold live. "What do we do?" one of the assistants asked. "We finish the show," the executive producer said heavily, "and then we figure out how to clean up this mess." But back on the main stage, as the crew scrambled to reorganize, as the co-hosts tried to collect themselves, as the audience whispered among themselves, one thing was crystal clear to everyone in that studio. Whoopi had crossed a line, and Dwayne Johnson had done exactly what he should have done. He'd stood up for himself. He'd defended his family. He'd refused to be disrespected. And he'd done it with more grace and dignity than anyone could have expected. Joy leaned over to Sunny. "He was right, you know." "About what?" Sunny asked. "Real artists lift each other up," Joy said softly. "We forgot that today. Or at least one of us did." Sunny nodded. Sarah wiped her eyes again. Inanna sat back in her chair, looking exhausted. They all knew this was going to be everywhere. Social media would explode. News outlets would cover it. Think pieces would be written. And at the center of it all would be one question that nobody could answer. What had Whoopi been thinking? The commercial break ended. The show came back. The co-hosts tried their best to continue. They brought up lighter topics. They tried to smile. They tried to pretend that everything was fine. But everyone watching could tell it wasn't. The energy was wrong. The chemistry was broken. And one chair at the table was empty. Whoopi never came back that day. She stayed in her dressing room. The show went on without her, which was probably for the best. Because if she'd come back, if she'd tried to defend what she'd done, it would have only made things worse. And Dwayne? He didn't post about it on social media. He didn't make a statement. He didn't do what most celebrities would do and try to control the narrative. He just went on with his day, because he didn't need to say anything else. His actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. In those 44 seconds when Whoopi questioned his parenting, when she called him a fake artist, when she showed her true colors, Dwayne had made a choice. He'd chosen dignity over publicity. He'd chosen respect over ratings. He'd chosen to walk away rather than engage in something ugly. And the audience, both in the studio and watching at home, saw exactly what happened. They saw a good man being pushed too far. They saw a host who thought she was untouchable finally face consequences for her behavior. They saw the other co-hosts try to salvage the situation. They saw everything unfold in real time. By the end of the show, as the credits rolled, as the audience filed out, as the crew started breaking down the set, everyone was talking about the same thing. Not the movie Dwayne had come to promote, not the other segments, not the planned discussions. Just those few minutes when everything fell apart. "I can't believe that just happened," one audience member said to another. "I know," her friend replied. "I've watched this show for years. I've never seen anything like that." "Did you see his face when she brought up his daughters?" the first woman asked. "He was so calm, but you could tell he was hurt." "Any parent would be," her friend agreed. "She had no right to say that. No right at all." They weren't the only ones having that conversation. All across the country, people were talking about what they just witnessed, and the overwhelming majority were on Dwayne's side. Because at the end of the day, it didn't matter how famous you were. It didn't matter how long you'd been on television. It didn't matter what platform you had. Treating people with basic respect mattered, and Whoopi had forgotten that. The co-hosts gathered in the hallway after the show wrapped. They didn't plan it. They just naturally gravitated toward each other, all thinking the same thoughts, all processing what had happened. "That was brutal," Sarah said. "It was necessary," Anna replied. "Someone needed to call her out. I just wish it hadn't happened like this." "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Joy asked. Sunny shook her head. "Bah, would you? After that?" They all fell silent, because they all knew the answer. No. Dwayne Johnson would never set foot on this set again. And honestly, who could blame him? "We need to address this," Joy said finally. "Tomorrow, on air. We can't just pretend it didn't happen." "Agreed," Sunny said. "We need to acknowledge it. Own our part in it." "Our part?" Sarah asked. "We didn't do anything." "Exactly," Anna said. "We sat there. We let it happen. We should have stepped in sooner." "You tried," Joy reminded her. "We all tried. But once Whoopi gets going..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. They all knew how Whoopi could be when she decided she was right about something. How she would steamroll over everyone else. How she would dismiss any criticism or pushback. They'd all been dealing with it for years. But today was different. Today, it had gone too far. And they all knew that something had to change. "Whatever happens," Sunny said, "we stick together. The four of us. We support each other. And we do better. We have to do better." The others nodded. They bumped fists, a small gesture of solidarity, and then they went their separate ways. Each of them heading home to decompress from one of the most stressful days of their careers. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Dwayne Johnson was probably in a gym, working out his frustration, processing what had happened, and feeling confident in the choice he'd made, because he knew who he was. He knew his worth, and he knew that no paycheck, no publicity, no platform was worth compromising his values. He'd walked away from The View, but he'd walked away with his dignity intact, with his self-respect intact, with his reputation intact, and in the court of public opinion, which is the only court that really matters in Hollywood, he'd already won. The heated exchange lasted less than 10 minutes from start to finish, but the impact would last much longer. It would spark conversations about how we treat guests, about how we conduct interviews, about the line between tough questions and personal attacks, about respect and professionalism and basic human decency. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that everyone could understand. You can be successful. You can be famous. You can have a platform and a voice and influence. But none of that gives you the right to be cruel. None of that gives you the right to attack someone's family. None of that gives you the right to tear someone down just because you think you can. Dwayne Johnson knew that. The audience knew that. The co-hosts knew that. And deep down, maybe Whoopi knew it too. But knowing and acknowledging are two different things. And as that day ended, as the sun set on what should have been a routine interview, only one question remained. Would anyone learn from what happened? Would this moment of ugliness lead to change? Would the show be better? Would Whoopi be better? Only time would tell. But for now, in this moment, one thing was certain. When a man who built his entire career on being kind and professional walks out of your show, when he chooses to leave rather than continue being disrespected, when he handles it with that much grace under pressure, you know you messed up. You know you went too far. And you know that everyone watching, everyone in that studio, everyone at home saw exactly what happened. They saw the antagonist reveal herself. They saw the good guy stand up for himself. And they saw real consequences play out in real time. That's what happens when you push too far. That's what happens when you forget that respect is a two-way street. That's what happens when you think your platform makes you untouchable. It took 44 seconds for one comment to change everything. 44 seconds to destroy what should have been a pleasant interview. 44 seconds to show the world who was really the problem. And those 44 seconds would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling.